In 1994, Future Crew released their final pieces of software. As a small crew working on demos for PCs and the C64, they soon recognized the inability for the studio to become a commercially successful developer, despite now being acknowledged as a pioneering studio. As a solution, the next year, Future Crew's organizer, Gore, along with two other members, Henchman and Psy, officially founded the Finnish developer studio of Remedy Entertainment with John Kavalev and Sami Vanhatelo. Today marks the 25th anniversary of that day, and Remedy is now stronger than ever. But how did they get here? As seems to be the norm with new studios, the first Remedy game was developed in a basement, specifically the basement of Gore's parents. In creating their first ever game, Remedy went with their first instinct and started work on High Speed, a racing game with a top-down perspective. The game would then go on to be published by the same publisher as Duke Nukem, who would appear as a character in the game. Yes, that's right, 3D Realms, or as it was then known, Apogee Software Productions. As a benefit of this, Apogee's founder, Scott Miller, acted as an advisor to the team. With his support, the game evolved into more than just a racing game, involving an upgrade system along with an aggressive gameplay style, something that has continued to be present in Remedy games to this day. Their first game was simple, yet highly addictive and full of action. Every car in the game would have a chain gun, and the player could upgrade its engine, tires and armor in order to take more damage and to complete courses faster. Damage to your car would carry forward to the next race, and repairs could be brought to bring down the damage level. Mechanics could be bribed ahead of races, resulting in a rival racer suffering a moderate amount of damage to their vehicle. This was settled by having a leaderboard system, so that this would be made to happen to the rival highest up on the table. Out of 6 available cars, increasing in quality, the player would start with the Vagabond and upgrade successively until they obtained the Deliberator. But that's not all. The game's use of a black market allowed for more creative cheats, with bumper spikes, landmines, and rocket fuel. When the player finally reaches the top spot on the leaderboard, they would have the chance to take down the final racer and take their place as the champion. Now no longer just a racing game, it was renamed to Death Rally and released for MS-DOS just over a year after Remedy's foundation. The only thing missing was some dialogue for the game. One of the earliest members to be recruited to the studio, who had been working on the graphics of this game, Petri Jarvilato, brought his friend, a student of English literature, into the mix, believing that he could help as a writer. And I am so glad that he did, because that writer's name is Sam Lake. After the release of Death Rally, Lake continued working at Remedy, pouring his heart and soul into the next releases of the studio, but more on that later. As shareware, Death Rally was released for free, but there was also a paid full version of the game. Thanks to its critical success, Death Rally would go on to be remastered in 2011. But 10 years before that, Remedy released its second title, a shooter inspired by movies from Hong Kong. The shooter would involve slow motion, something that would carry forward to Remedy's next IPs, and would have the camera detached from the playable character, following the action, resulting in some really cool cinematic shots. This also allowed the player to avoid incoming fire and reload quickly. Known as bullet time, this first featured in the Matrix movie in 1999, with Remedy being the first to incorporate this into a video game. The game? Max Payne. The timeline is hard to get a full idea of, but from what I found, Max Payne had the gameplay feature of bullet time already in development, along with the trademark to the term, before the Matrix release, at which point Warner Bros. Bought the trademark. From their origins, Remedy knew that a new engine could be created for the game, so of course they did, calling it Max FX. The new game engine was used for cutscenes, but the team opted for a cheaper method of storytelling through comic book panels, which I think would likely have acted as a storyboard model through development, with the ability to be rearranged and easily edited. About a year after Max FX had entered development came E3 of 1998. At the event, the first trailer was released, and although it doesn't seem like much today, it was seemingly revolutionary, particularly due to the visual effects made possible with Remedy's engine, including a literal smoking gun. The project remained ambitious with a trip to New York next year as the designers researched environmental aspects of the city. Many photos were taken as the crew was escorted around the city by none other than a couple of ex-NYPD bodyguards. Who else to do this with when Max was a former NYPD cop? And of course, Sam Lake was brought back for the story, but also acted as the face model for Max, whereas James McCaffrey was the voice actor, due to the budget for the game. The game was delayed twice from its initial release date in 1999 to the summer of 2001, with the extra time being used to improve graphics, cancel the multiplayer mode, and release more trailers annually at E3s. Released on Windows, Max Payne was another successful Remedy, lauded for its high-resolution textures, use of bullet time, and sound design, but was criticized for the rigid facial expressions. It was also the first Remedy game of many to take inspiration and pay tribute to icons including John Woo and David Lynch, and marked the start of many trends that the company would come to be known for. The following year, Max Payne would release on the Xbox and Apple Macintosh, pushing the PS2 to its limits, arguably too much, resulting in some technical issues and reductions in graphical quality. But this just shows how cutting-edge Remedy's technology back then was. It was awarded many awards and even a BAFTA for the best PC game. For the console versions, development was outsourced to Rockstar, with Take-Two Interactive spending $10 million on the IP rights. As part of the new deal, Remedy would make a sequel, but luckily, they were given more than enough creative freedom by Take-Two. Sam Lake returned to write the script, with the main gameplay being carried forward from the original game. Bullet time would be upgraded to allow for Max to move further into the zone, slowing time down even further and earning more bullet time by killing enemies. Lake would go on to study screenwriting at the Theatre Academy of Finland, and this would pay off heavily in the future. Released in 2003 for the original Xbox and the PlayStation 2, Max Payne 2: The Fall of Max Payne would not sell as well as the original, despite its great reviews. It would, however, go on to be released on Steam in 2008, and the final sequel by Rockstar for PS3 and the Xbox 360 in 2012. Although Remedy didn't work on the final game, the team was able to act as consultants, offering feedback on what would become of their sold IP. On the rights of Payne, 20th Century Fox bought the movie rights from Collision and made an adaptation in 2008. Yeah, it was a bad adaptation, but Remedy knows this and are proud to have a Hollywood movie based on a finished video game, as Lake put it. Surprisingly, the movie rights were sold before the 2001 release, due to the anticipation of the game's arrival. Past this point, Remedy were not involved in the film's production and were left to be informed with the public. But let's now go back and see what happened after Max Payne 2, after 2003. Whereas Max Payne was much like a movie in its presentation, Remedy's next game would opt for a more episodic system in the form of a psychological thriller, while keeping the cinematic style. Again, Remedy was ambitious with gameplay, this time initially developing an open world for the hero to explore in what could have been a survival game. With a dynamic day and night cycle, the playable character would collect resources by nightfall for protection from enemies in the dark. However, this gameplay would have been unsuitable for the story that the team wanted to create. Of course, I'm talking about Alan Wake, with its focus on the famous writer battling his dark demons with his flashlight and gun. Remedy put a lot of detail into this project, including having a landscape architect to consult with on the world design, traveling to the Pacific Northwest for an authentic small town feel, and even going to the trouble of having true-to-life stars in the sky by checking NASA's star maps. Alan Wake was the first Remedy game I played, and going into it, I wasn't expecting much, but oh was I wrong. While I sometimes give the gameplay a hard time, It was really unique and special, keeping me immersed in the setting despite the linear storyline. I often felt scared when playing the game, not a casual player of horror-style games, but if there was ever a scary game for me to play, I'm glad it was Alan Wake. To this day, I believe that Alan Wake may be the best game I've played with its epic story and inventive gameplay, and this really is a testament to the talent of the tiny crew of 45 who worked on this product. I've spoken more about the game in general in another video, and I'll link to this at the end and in the description. In 2005, Remedy presented a tech demo of their early vision of Alan Wake to the press, attracting the interest of Microsoft Game Studios as a publisher. This naturally eliminated the console compatibility issues that had previously affected Max Payne. Development started to get complicated once Microsoft started to suggest improvements, with the tech demo having been the open world version of the game. But after a few years, Remedy revised the game's main features to a more linear game, which supported the story much better. However, the map and all its details were kept, adding to the sense that this was a real world that was being explored, with the bridge, the mountains, and the lake all still based on real environments. And it wasn't just the world that seemed natural, but the characters with their backstories and dialogue that flowed naturally. The absence of loading screens also helped enormously with immersion, captivating the gamer through cutscenes instead. The story held metaphorical depth, resulting in lots of discussion and many theories, with an open yet gratifying ending. Despite the short time to beat the game, my single playthrough of the game gave me an experience that stays with me to this day.
Stephen King once wrote that nightmares exist outside of logic, and there's little fun to be had in explanations. They're antithetical to the poetry of fear. In a horror story, the victim keeps asking why, but there can be no explanation, and there shouldn't be one. The unanswered mystery is what stays with us the longest, and it's what we'll remember in the end. My name is Alan Wake. I'm a writer. I've always had a vivid imagination, but this dream unsettled me. It was wild and dark and weird, even by my standards. So yes, it began with a dream.
In this way, the long development time doesn't go unnoticed, and allowed the game to show Remedy's skill in world building and story. Players interpreted different parts of the story in different ways, and this was encapsulated in really quite a lovely Easter egg in Quantum Break, a future Remedy release.
I'll fight my way through.
It's not a lake. It's an ocean.
He's been gone for 5 years.
Dark matter and dark energy constitute over 95% of our universe. We're just a speck of light floating in an endless ocean of darkness. Every story finds its writer. Wake has a bloody knife in his light of the flashlight. He smiles a wicked sweaty rising from the blood on his face, eyes staring. us have two faces. The one we wear for all to see, and the face that lies beneath in the dark.
On the character of Alan Wake, writer Sam Lake said that Wake's story was a metaphor for Remedy's work, with Wake's previous novels based on a police detective like Max Payne, and Alan currently being in the position of dealing with writer's block, similar to Remedy's difficulty figuring out where to go next. After its release, Lake deservedly became the creative director of Remedy. Alan Wake recently celebrated its 10-year anniversary after gaining a cult following from release, with the number of fans growing ever bigger still thanks to its quality and its influence on Remedy's future games. Where Max Payne had been written as a singular release with an unexpected sequel, Alan Wake was written as the first of a series, which unfortunately, due to a lack of funding, could not be developed. Some parts of the story were able to be explored further in the 2 DLC specials, however, and they were able to develop a sequel in the form of an Xbox Live Arcade game, Alan Wake's American Nightmare, which released in 2012 to mostly positive reviews. Some gameplay elements would be transferred to Quantum Break, the next Xbox exclusive by Remedy. Remedy recently brought back the publishing rights to Alan Wake from Microsoft and mentioned being in the process of adapting the story for television a few years ago, but since then, the community hasn't heard much. Still, we're excited for whatever they do next with Alan Wake, past the upcoming DLC, which I'll talk about later. In 2014, Remedy experimented with a mobile game, Agents of Storm, which was released on iOS to a commercial success. With the move to current-gen consoles back in 2013, Remedy would make yet another game engine, a more powerful game engine, a game engine that is still used today, Northlight, Remedy's storytelling technology. Northlight allows Remedy to create truly breathtaking scenes with realistic particle lighting based on a next-generation, physically based renderer, as Remedy puts it, to reach a Hollywood-grade quality bar. Quantum Break was a great game to showcase this, with its innovative time-based gameplay, which would rewind the physics and destruction caused by stutters and the main character, Jack Joyce. Northlight would not just be able to rewind and play back physical surroundings, but the sounds too, driving forward the action with flawlessly synced visuals and audio. Northlight allows for real-time ray tracing, enhancing graphics to a cinematic quality. Reflections may not have used ray tracing in Quantum Break, but they looked stunning nonetheless. The cast of Quantum Break is diverse, talented, and a huge part of the game, with the likes of Shawn Ashmore from X-Men, Aidan Gillen from The Wire and Game of Thrones, Dominic Monaghan from Lost and the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and Lance Reddick from John Wick and more recently Angel Has Fallen, to name just a few. It was a delight to see so many big names in this game, made all the better with Northlight, which gave more realistic acting in-game with greater emotional depth and range due to the pioneering motion capture techniques used by dimensional imaging. Northlight showcases just how far Remedy has come since Max Payne's static, often described as constipated, face. Honestly, Quantum Break was revolutionary, but underappreciated, utilizing dynamic environments, realistic character visuals, and innovative gameplay mechanics in what the studio described as a transmedia action shooter video game and television hybrid. Quantum Break released in 2016 to great reviews of the game, but mixed views on the television aspect. IGN described the game as a shooter with brains, coming from the way in which the game encourages you to get involved in the combat rather than taking it easy, hiding behind cover like in other shooters due to the smart enemies that will flush you out of cover.
Jesus. Okay, good. It's cool. Just gotta make it across the
Unlocking skills as the game progresses, rather than all at once, keeps the player on their toes as they learn how to use each skill effectively in fast-paced and intense combat, where the most enjoyable experience comes from fighting in close quarters. Parts of this more immersive combat system would be transferred to Control. The variety of time powers was great fun to play around with, especially due to the new game engine. Players could freeze time to stop incoming bullets, freeze the enemies who sent those bullets, stack bullets at those frozen enemies, dealing more damage, and escape by dodging or running at super speed. This all made for a very refreshing shooter experience, which at the time of launch was the best-selling original game since the release of the Xbox One.
My name is Paul Serene. I founded Monarch Solutions 17 years ago with a very clear purpose. There are those who would question my actions. I'm recording this as a final statement of vindication, a testimony of how things came to be. I've always been devoted to my mission. Never deterred from my goal, no matter the sacrifice. Because I've seen where this leads. I've seen where it all ends.
We have a problem. No word from Jack Joyce's transport. It should have arrived here by now. We may have a traitor on the inside. You're due for your treatment. I'll find who's behind this.
Find Jack. That's our priority. Get your best man on it.
There's more. As you know, Jack's level of interference led to unexpected complications. Witnesses from the university were transported here. You need to take a look.
My powers grew stronger, even as the Chronon syndrome worsened. I could choose a path that would become the actual future, but it wasn't optional. The moment wouldn't end until I made up my mind.
So far, Quantum Break is the only Remedy game I've replayed, due to its use of junctions, which were choices at the end of each gameplay segment. Players would take control of Paul Serene, the main villain, for a few minutes of gameplay before making a choice, which would affect the following television episode in a unique aspect of the game. The choice, coupled with the TV episode, really gave Paul and Monarch a chance to shine as they were humanized well, with some even calling Paul the true hero. I always try to see both sides, considering how Paul's choice would affect Jack, and which choice would make more sense for my version of Paul. Choices mattered, and weren't just the superficial roundabout that would take the next part of the story in the same direction, no matter what you would do. Quantum ripples, triggered by interacting with objects in gameplay, would also affect the television episodes in minor but satisfying ways, adding pieces of dialogue here and there, and also changing the environments.
We'll get to your lab. I want to see your presentation. I know you love this stuff. Come on, man. Dazzle me.
Well, if you insist.
Progress. Our primary drive as a species. Over time, we have cured life-threatening illnesses. Explore the world.
Oh, good. Going into marketing spiel mode.
Don't ruin my flow. But there is one element which denies us true progress. Time itself. Now, I'm not a scientist, but here's how it's been explained to me. We've known that, in theory, a rotating black hole creates a deformation in space-time, potentially allowing travel through both space and time. Years ago, William Joyce, your brother, posited the existence of chronon particles, now known as Meyer-Joyce particles, which fill an all-encompassing field, enabling the constant and steady progression of time. Here at Project Promenade, we have combined both these theories to discover a way to manipulate that field. And the results are staggering. There's more, but that's enough of a primer for now.
The plot worked superbly, and it was very satisfying to have a time travel story that made logical sense. There was certainly a great amount of care taken to achieve this by Lake and the other writers, going to the lengths of consulting with an ex-CERN employee, Sixi Rasanen. Sorry, I am probably saying that and a lot of the other Finnish names wrong, so that the plot would be consistent with theoretical and quantum physics. I did enjoy the cliffhanger ending, which I won't spoil, but Mr. Door was an interesting twist that I liked.
Ready?
It's like we're launching a nuke. Wait, we're not launching a nuke, right?
One way to find out. 3, 2, 1. Jack.
What? You didn't say 0. Come on, man. We need ground rules.
Okay, you turn, I'll follow. Close enough.
God damn, Paul. What is this?
Corridor. The passenger enters one end, travels around the loop, exits the other, and arrives at the predetermined time in the physical location where the machine is situated in that time.
Passenger. Wait. This is a corridor for... You're actually going inside that thing? In the machine, through time? It's a fucking time machine.
I'm going to be the first, Jack. And you're my witness.
This is crazy, Paul. I mean, this can't be safe. What happens when...
Our team has already proved it works in the trial phase. It is ready. We've passed every test, every inspection. We're about to make history, Jack. All you have to do is hit that switch.
Two minutes to the past.
Remember this moment.
Paul! What? How...
It's fine.
It's okay. Stay calm, Jack.
Stay calm. There's two of you. You just fucking multiplied.
This is exactly what was supposed to happen. He's me, a future version of me from 2 minutes in the future. Your evil future self. We did it! Fucking incredible. I mean, just imagine the implications. We could warn people about disasters before they happen, cure diseases before they spread. I just had this conversation. Still sounds good second time.
Jesus Christ.
Now go into the machine. You need to complete the cycle. Yeah. Yes. Of course.
Wait, Paul, what are you doing?
It's all a big loop, Jack. I need to enter the machine and travel back to the moment I exited the machine in order to, well, be here.
And what if you don't?
There is no what if. I'm here, it's already happened. You saw it, Jack. We did it.
Oh, that's impossible. That's literally impossible. I mean, I can't even...
There's no time to stop now. We need to test the other direction. Set the machine to 5 minutes to the future.
The reason the television aspect wasn't all bad is because of these interactive elements, but also, like I said before, Northlight allowed for far more realistic character models, probably some of the most realistic models at the time, which ensured that the game and television aspects were very similar in appearance, serving the narrative well, and the junctions helped even more with emotional investment in the characters. However, it is true that the television aspect could have been produced better, and the game elevated its quality to an extent past which the TV aspect wasn't good enough on its own. But of course we must acknowledge how this hybrid performance set Quantum Break apart from so many others as a time travel, transmedia, storytelling experience with player agency affecting the story going forward, with surprisingly exciting gameplay and a hidden lore, all made possible with revolutionary technology. Remedy have shown interest in a sequel to Quantum Break in the past, but Microsoft does retain the publishing rights. Last year, Control was released by Remedy, with 505 Games as the publisher. Remedy will not own the publishing rights for the next 19 years. However, 505 gave a lot of support in funding marketing and development for this newest release, which was made available for Xbox One and PC, but also for the PS4, something that hasn't been done since the fall of Max Payne. From playing the game, you can see how Remedy was let loose with their storytelling, now owning the IP rights as opposed to Microsoft with Quantum Break, and this pays off. Remedy has always put the story first with their console releases, and Control follows on in this way. The base game built up a huge amount of lore, setting up a lot of theories and backgrounds to things that are encountered in the game. At first this can seem intimidating, but the player soon finds themselves invested in the game's world. From the first scene, I was hooked with its weird yet strangely compelling opening, which set the tone well for the game, but without giving away how much weirder things would become. While at a first glance the setting may seem a bit restrictive, the shifting architecture of the oldest house, the base of the government's Federal Bureau of Control, or FBC, keeps it fresh and interesting. From the outside it looks like a normal brutalist skyscraper, averting attention from those who aren't looking for it, hiding the infinite rooms on the inside. As a new cross-gen game, Control allowed many new fans to see just how good Remedy is at telling a story, with their extraordinary writing ability, collectibles included. Collectibles felt meaningful, as is the norm for Remedy's games, with a reason to go out of my way to find them on the way to a mission, or just in traversal of the offices, or the caves, or starlit areas of the map. But they weren't always scattered in random places. In fact, more often than not, they were in appropriate locations, such as research documents in offices or film reels in presentation rooms. In particular, the Threshold Kids series, made for children, but still really disturbing, were a fun set of collectibles to find.
Step into the FBC, there's lots to do, there's lots to read, but don't touch and don't scream much. Let's join the Threshold Kids. Let's join the Threshold Kids.
I can see you're upset, Meg. Why don't you tell Uncle Mr. Bones what's wrong?
I did bad on my clairvoyance test.
You can't ace every test, Meg. You see, everyone has different brains. Some brains can talk to each other. We call this ESP.
ESP?
Some brains can lift objects, like a baseball. Talk about a fly ball, eh, Meg? No interruptions! So who cares if you fail your clairvoyance test? Maybe your brain can throw baseballs, or talk to dead people, or make friends blind. Once we know what your brains can do, we'll know what job to give you. And if your brains are just right, you'll get to sit in the big chair.
What if I don't want the big chair?
What if I don't want the big chair? Everyone wants the big chair, Meg! That's why we're all here. Use those brains to listen for once, or the only chair you'll get in is the one with straps.
And of course there was Aki, the Finnish janitor, who was one of my favourite characters. His strange Finnish phrases in dialogue, coupled with his comfortable nature, especially in such a strange environment, made him good fun to talk to. Dr. Darling was another favourite, with his comedic nature. He acted as a means for Jesse, and by proxy the player, to learn about the inner workings of the FBC and their research into the paranormal. But he does it in such a calm manner that the weird seems normal. And of course, for everyone who completed the game, we all remember Dynamite.
Nobody knew her name, but she turned up just the same. There was a knock on the door, a thump on the floor, and the party turned insane as she called out her name. And she walked in looking like dynamite. She said, "Now come along and boogaloo through the night." And by the way she's moving, well, dynamite, might she not? With all she's got the whole town lighting up dynamite. Nobody quite knowing what to do, wrong or right, but they all know Jessie is dynamite. They're right.
Jessie was a strong character, and I enjoyed using her powers and the service weapon, a gun given by the enigmatic board. The ability to shift into multiple forms, be it a pistol, a shotgun, or a grenade launcher, among others. Having to pick two forms for quick use and availability allowed for a sense of customization, as well as the unlockable outfits of course, and different playstyles to take on the variety of enemies in the game, which included some seriously tough bosses. I sometimes had to leave a boss after too many deaths so that I could do some interesting side missions to upgrade my weapons and abilities. Towers, built upon some of Quantum Break's, made combat immersive yet again, with new abilities being unlocked through story progression, making combat that much more thrilling. Launch and levitate were probably my most used abilities, along with seize, with the shield only being used for tough enemies. Combat was entertaining from the get-go, and just got better the further I played. Even after completing the game, the hiss can be fought in temporary side missions, or the survival mode from the altered jukebox item. So many people have been making use of photo mode, and for good reason. Control looks stunning with ray tracing active, but even without, due to Northlight. On the next gen of consoles, Control will look utterly amazing. Control is a game that feels like it's made for next gen consoles. After finishing the main story and getting all of the collectibles, besides one due to an unfortunate bug, last year, I put Control back on my shelf until the release of the first expansion, The Foundation. It answered a lot of questions, while setting up others and making me question what I thought I knew about the game. It also managed to give a deeper explanation of the origin of the oldest house and the FBC. Combat was expanded upon with 2 new abilities and a new enemy. This refreshed the combat, but my only minor complaints, are that I would have liked to be able to use these abilities in places other than the Foundation, and that I wanted more time to play in this new area. But that second complaint only serves to justify how great a world Remedy has built with the game. Back when I was playing through the story last year, I stumbled upon a collectible for the one and only Alan Wake.
I used to know where fiction ends and reality begins. Here, they're all the same. It's a hideous trap my every thought made real. Fear, desire. How can I ever know for sure I've escaped and not just lost in my own fantasy of it? That thought alone can drive you insane.
In that one move, along with a bunch of other collectibles related to the famous writer, Remedy established a connected universe with Alan Wake and Control, which has now been confirmed by Lake. Needless to say, that made me ecstatic. And more recently, at the start of the month, Remedy released the long-awaited trailer to the second expansion, Or. This really made me overjoyed, and I am super excited to play this. From the moment I heard the typewriter and his voice, saw that door in the Ocean View Motel, and the deer with the red background, woo! I am so hyped for this. We will get to see Alan Wake with Northlight. As the first content developed entirely from home, the all DLC will be released 1 year after the release of Control, next week. I am really hopeful of another song by Old Gods of Asgard, better known as Poets of the Fall, but I wouldn't be too disappointed if this doesn't happen. One of the ideas in Max Payne 2 was to have the cop lose his memory but remember a line from a song. This was later changed to a poem written by Sam Lake, which he passed on to his friends in Poets of the Fall, and from this, Late Goodbye was created as the end credit song for the game. The band then proceeded to work on a few tracks for Alan Wake and his American Nightmare as the Old Gods of Asgard, a retired band that you meet in the game, before coming back for Control.
Do me a favor, Sonny! I could really use a tune right now. Coconut, number 6 in the jukebox. I'd do it myself, but both of my legs have gone to sleep. Bad circulation. Yeah.
Are you serious? Coconut again? You disgust me. Call yourself a rocker. Unbelievable.
Ah, it does that. Get stuck. Yeah, you need to give it a good solid whack. You put the lime in the coconut, drink them both up. Now that's what I'm talking about, yes!
This is it. I've died and gone to hell.
Due to contract issues, Quantum Break did not include an early version of the Labyrinth, which had been planned for the game. It is always a pleasure to listen to their songs, especially as they play at epic parts of the games, becoming instant highlights of Alan Wake and Control. In Alan Wake, Children of the Elder God plays as the Taken attack a stage in hordes, with the poet and the muse being key to the plot. This could also be seen in Quantum Break as an Easter egg.
Children of the Elder God.
For Control, Take Control plays in the truly awesome Ashtray Maze sequence, which was a highlight for many, if not all, players of the game. And if that's not enough, these tracks often have hidden audio like in Balance Slays the Demon from American Nightmare, which mentioned the town of Ordinary 7 years before Control's release. Since Max Payne, music has certainly played a huge part in Remedy's games, with Petri Alanko and Sam Lake even once slow jamming a presentation on their music live to a theatre of people. From Alan Wake onward, Petri Alanko has been the composer of Remedy's games, making consistently powerful soundtracks. Alan Wake had a fantastically moving soundtrack, Quantum Break had electronic music for the time-bending gameplay, and Control has a distorted, eerie atmosphere reflecting the nature of the story, this soundtrack being co-written by Martin Stig Anderson. Sam Lake also wrote Heroes Tango for Control with Petri, and this was noteworthy for its references to previous games. That and the talented singing of Artie's voice actor, who also won a BAFTA as the best performer in a supporting role. Control was rightfully the winner of many awards, including the Game Awards Best Art Direction and others in audio and technology. Over the years, Remedy has amassed many awards, with over 120 Game of the Year awards, with Time giving the award for the best video game in 2010 to Alan Wake. Recently, Remedy published a trailer for Crossfire X's new story mode, which will be an Xbox launch exclusive when it releases later this year. This project has been in collaboration with Smilegate since 2016 and will use Northlight, marking a move into a first rather than third-person shooter, as Remedy worked on an external property After this, Remedy will go on to work on a story mode for Crossfire HD, a remake of the successful original Crossfire. For some time now in the past few years, the studio has made a change to work on multiple projects at the same time, asking their employees which projects they would like to work on. Vanguard was one of these smaller groups set up by the company in order to work on challenging existing multiplayer concepts to make innovative multiplayer games in keeping with Remedy's other games. In March this year, Epic Games signed a publishing deal for 2 games, similar to 505 games, in that Epic will fund development with Remedy possessing control over the IP. This should be exciting as the larger of the 2 games will be a AAA game set in Remedy's now established connected universe, made all the more exciting with Sam Lake mentioning that the studio has had the idea of developing this for 10 years. This could hint at a potential sequel to Alan Wake, given the 10-year anniversary, but could also be a new IP. Either way, it should be awesome. Tero Vertela, CEO since 2016, has plans to launch at least 1 game or expansion every year going forward. In his own words, this marks a new era in Remedy history. Quality content every year? Who would complain? Remedy has grown over 25 years from 5 original members to a team of 260 people from 26 countries. From leaving the finished demo scene to actually making the most exceptional games across the world with expert engines, stunningly beautiful visuals, and absolutely compelling stories to be remembered for a lifetime. Remedy Entertainment legitimately are pioneers of gaming and the art form. It is rare to find a game studio as impressive as Remedy, and even more so for them to deliver consistently unforgettable storytelling experiences. Somehow, Remedy never disappoints. 25 years of constant evolution, from Death Rally to taking control of their future. Remedy, my favorite game studio. Here's to the next 25 years.